On a bustling morning, a young black nurse hurries to her hospital shift, unaware that just blocks away, a billionaire CEO faces an assassination attempt. As a gunman raises his weapon in broad daylight, the nurse doesn't flee, she leaps into danger. One gunshot. One choice. Everything changes. What began as a routine morning transforms into a life-or-death moment that will forge a national hero and redefine her future forever. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was already past 8 a.m. in downtown Chicago. The city pulsed with urgency. Footsteps clattered, horns blared down Michigan Avenue, and the aroma of roasted espresso drifted from cafes. Danielle Porter darted between pedestrians, her scrubs stuffed in her gym bag, curls already loosening. He was late again. South Lake Medical was still 4 blocks away. She hadn't eaten, hadn't paused since leaving her cramped Bronzeville apartment. She had no idea that in the next 30 seconds, her life would fracture and reform into something unimaginable. Elsewhere, just a block ahead at the corner of 47th and South Wash, Charlotte Ellingson, billionaire CEO of Ellingson Renewables, sat at a small sidewalk cafe. She sipped black coffee from delicate porcelain. This wasn't her usual scene of penthouse boardrooms and private jets, but colleagues had insisted, it's got soul. So, amused, she agreed. Charlotte leaned back, her blonde hair neatly pinned, her white silk blouse spotless. Around her, laughter and the clink of silverware mingled. To an outsider, they were just successful women enjoying a Monday. But Charlotte was more than successful, she was powerful. And that power had created enemies. Hours away from signing a merger that would shift the global lithium trade, clean energy's new gold rush, she was oblivious that someone had already decided she wouldn't live to see that deal signed. Across the street, a man in a gray hoodie, late 30s, average height, leaned against a traffic light pole. No one noticed him, not the dog walker, not the couple arguing. But Danielle saw him. She just turned the corner, narrowly missing a delivery cyclist when her breath hitched. Something was off. Her eyes scanned instinctively, nursing had sharpened her senses. She saw the angle of his shoulders, the way he gripped his duffel bag strap, the weight in his stare. Then she saw the gun, glinting briefly under his jacket sleeve as he reached inside. Her stomach dropped. Time didn't slow, it cracked wide open. Danielle dropped her bag without thinking. She bolted across the street, weaving through oncoming traffic like a flame chasing oxygen. No plan, no pause, just motion. The man stepped off the curb, both hands on the weapon, eyes locked on Charlotte. Charlotte looked up at the wrong time. She saw him. Froze. Her teacup tipped. Her friend's voice faltered. Danielle didn't shout, there wasn't time. She launched herself forward. The gunshot cracked like thunder, slicing through conversation and clattering dishes. People screamed. Chairs scraped. Glass shattered. Danielle's body collided with Charlotte's just as the bullet struck. It hit her shoulder, slamming her backward against the table edge. She didn't scream, her body couldn't. Her vision flashed white, then blood. Charlotte's scarf turned red as she caught Danielle before she hit the pavement. Oh no. Stay with me. Charlotte gasped, pressing trembling hands to the wound. Don't you dare close your eyes. Danielle's lips parted, her voice thin and cracked, barely audible. Are you okay? Don't speak. Charlotte snapped, panicked but focused. Help is coming, just hold on. The world blurred. A construction worker tackled the gunman. A delivery driver kicked the weapon away. Chaos reigned. People ducked, screamed, ran. But Charlotte didn't move. She held Danielle's face in her hands like it was made of glass. Blood soaked the concrete. Sirens screamed in the distance. 5 minutes later, paramedics arrived. One barked, "What's her name?" Charlotte blinked. "I don't know." As the ambulance doors slammed shut, Charlotte climbed in beside the bleeding woman who had saved her life. She didn't look back. The ambulance screamed through the streets, slicing through Monday traffic with urgency and grief. Inside, Charlotte gripped Danielle's hand, the only solid thing left. Her own hands were drenched in blood. Her once pristine blouse was ruined, clinging to her. But she didn't care. All she could see was Danielle's face, pale, fluttering in and out of consciousness. Her eyes rolled, her lips moving without sound. Paramedics worked around them, voices sharp and fast. BP's dropping. Pulse weak. Clavicle shattered. We need to intubate now. One applied firm pressure to the wound. Danielle winced but didn't cry out. She was slipping under. Charlotte leaned in close, voice trembling. Stay awake. Just keep breathing. You're going to be okay. They pulled into South Lake Medical's emergency entrance within minutes, though it felt like an hour. A trauma team waited, prepped. As they pulled Danielle from the ambulance, Charlotte followed without hesitation, ignoring her own security team shouting her name. Cameras flashed. Phones raised. Chaos built. But none of it touched her. The only thing she saw was the young woman who had stepped in front of a bullet. We're taking her into trauma, someone said. You can't come in. Charlotte stopped at the glass doors, breathless. Her heart pounded. She watched through the window as the medical team disappeared with Danielle down a bright hallway. Hours passed. Charlotte never left the corridor. She refused food, water, even a fresh change of clothes. People came and went, her legal counsel, her executive assistant, 2 local detectives. She waved them off. Nothing mattered. Her heels lay discarded. Her phone buzzed itself into silence. News of the attempted assassination had reached the media. Talk shows, finance channels, headlines screamed her name. But none of it touched her. She was still reliving the moment. Danielle's faint voice. Are you okay? That question haunted her more than the gunshot. Through the ICU glass she watched the operating team. Lines, tubes, blood bags, monitors beeped in stuttering rhythm. At one point the sound flatlined and Charlotte's breath caught. But then it returned, faint but steady. We're losing her. No, wait. Hold pressure. We've got rhythm again. He's in shock. Push O negative now. Words Charlotte never thought she'd care about suddenly became sacred. She whispered silent prayers she didn't even believe in. Finally, a man in surgical scrubs stepped into the hallway, his face blank. Charlotte stood so fast she nearly fell. Is she? Her voice cracked. She made it, he said. Barely. The bullet missed a major artery by less than an inch. She's lucky, but it'll be a long recovery. Charlotte felt her knees give slightly but caught herself. Can I see her? She's sedated, but yes. Just for a moment. The room was dim. Machines hummed. Danielle lay motionless, wrapped in sterile blankets, her shoulder bandaged tight, breathing assisted by tubes and soft mechanical hisses. Her skin had lost its warmth, but she was alive. Charlotte stepped closer, slow and reverent. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stood there watching the woman who had thrown herself between her and death. Finally, after a long moment, Charlotte whispered, You don't know me, but you saved my life. And I swear to you I will not forget this. Danielle didn't stir, but somewhere beneath a haze of morphine and trauma, her body continued to fight. And Charlotte, for the first time in her life, didn't feel invincible. She felt indebted. Outside the ICU the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city. But inside that quiet room the day hadn't ended, it had only just begun. And what came next would change both their lives forever. 3 days had passed since the gunshot. The wound in Danielle's shoulder ached with every breath, every movement, every passing hour. Her body bore the weight of pain, but it was the silence that weighed more, thick, reverent, unfamiliar. Nurses moved gently around her, respectful in a different way. Their eyes lingered a little too long, their smiles carrying something between awe and hesitation. Outside her hospital room the world buzzed with frenzy. Reporters crowded the entrance, camera flashes like lightning, voices calling her name as if they'd known her forever. But inside these walls time moved slower. Her body was healing, yes, but her soul hadn't caught up. And then that morning, just after the nurse checked her vitals, the door opened with a whisper. Danielle turned, expecting another white coat, another gentle voice offering water or medication. Instead she saw her, Charlotte Ellingson. Immaculate, poised, but somehow softer than before. Gone was the high-powered business attire. She wore a soft gray sweater and grace that felt disarming. Behind her were 2 men. One in a navy suit with a leather portfolio, the other carrying a briefcase with a discreet earpiece. The room shifted. Danielle sat up slowly, wincing. Charlotte, you came back. Charlotte smiled gently, moving to her side. I told you I would, she said, then nodded to the men. I brought some people with me if that's all right. I think it's time we begin. Danielle blinked, caught off guard. Begin what? Charlotte didn't answer immediately. She gestured and the man with the briefcase stepped forward, setting it on the tray across Danielle's bed. He clicked it open with the kind of silence that carried weight. Inside wasn't a mountain of papers, just 2 items. A deed to a penthouse apartment at Lakefront Tower overlooking the heart of Chicago, and a bank transfer confirmation. Danielle's name printed in clean serif font. The amount below it shimmered, $20 million. The breath left Danielle's lungs. For a moment she wasn't sure if it was real or the fevered echo of trauma and morphine. He stared at the numbers, then at Charlotte. Her voice came out small, cracked. What is this? Charlotte's tone didn't waver. It's yours, she said, firm but kind. The funds have already been transferred. The apartment is ready, fully furnished, overlooking the lake. There are no strings. This isn't a loan. It's not conditional. It's a thank you. Danielle's hands trembled against the sheets. I don't deserve this, she whispered. I was just, Charlotte interrupted gently, you stepped into a bullet. You didn't know me. You had no reason to act. But you did. This isn't charity, Danielle. It's freedom. You deserve to live without fear, without debt, without scarcity. This is your life rewritten. Danielle turned away slightly, as if afraid to meet that reality head-on. I've never had money. Not like that. Not even close. Her voice dropped lower. I grew up rationing peanut butter and praying for rent extensions. I don't know what to do with $20 million. You don't have to know today, Charlotte said softly. You just have to know it's real. The man in the navy suit stepped back. The deed has been signed. Your name's on the lease. Staff is available if you want them or not. It's your space, Miss Porter. Your peace. Danielle's throat tightened. Her world had always been built on doing more with less. Now it had been turned upside down with a signature and a single act of courage. Her eyes welled, but she held the tears at bay. Just then a knock sounded at the door. A nurse peeked in, hesitant. There's a visitor, she said. She says she's family. Before Danielle could ask, the door flung open. Danielle. Her mother rushed in, tears already falling. Oh, my baby. My God, I've been praying since the moment I heard. I flew in as soon as I could. She reached her daughter's bedside, hands shaking as they touched her face. Danielle could barely breathe. Mama, she whispered. I thought I'd lost you, her mother cried. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. Charlotte stepped back quietly, giving them space. She didn't need to be the center of this moment. But then Danielle's mother turned, eyes widening. You're Charlotte Ellingson, she said, almost in disbelief. I am, Charlotte replied. But your daughter, she's the one who saved me. No, her mother said, voice breaking. You saved her too. The briefcase still sat open, the weight of its contents heavier than gold. Danielle's mother looked down, hand to her chest. What is all this? Charlotte spoke with intention. It's a thank you. A home. A future. A promise. Tears spilled down Danielle's face now, silent and raw. She looked from her mother to Charlotte, then back at the documents. Her name, her future written in ink and faith. And for the first time she believed that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. And soon the world would know what she intended to do with it. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Danielle Porter left the hospital. The flashbulbs, the chants, the endless applause outside the lobby, they were still etched in her memory like chalk on glass. For someone who had spent her life unnoticed in scrubs, the sudden weight of fame was overwhelming. But she didn't run from it. She carried it carefully, intentionally, like a nurse holding fragile life in her hands. Because this time it wasn't about her survival. It was about what came next. Charlotte Ellingson had gifted her $20 million and a penthouse that touched the sky. But Danielle had never been taught to live for luxury. She didn't dream in silk or spend mornings with champagne. She dreamed of warm beds for night shift nurses, of clinics that didn't turn away the uninsured, of quiet rooms where overworked healers could finally exhale. And so she went to work. Different work. A work of rebuilding, restoring, repaying the world for letting her live. The foundation came first, the First Line Fund. Its mission was simple: protect and uplift frontline medical workers. No bureaucracy, no red tape, just action. Within weeks, the fund erased over $2 million in student loans from South Lake's nursing staff. Danielle remembered each name as they called, crying into her office line, hands shaking over their debt notices. She sat with them, listened to their stories. The nurse who had worked 3 jobs to send her son to college. The custodian who had lost his home during the pandemic but still showed up for every overnight shift. She renovated the trauma wing where she once lay bleeding. The new sign above the entrance read, Porter Recovery Unit. Bright walls, new machines, real beds. Not because I wanted to be remembered, Danielle told the staff, but because I never want another patient to die in a hallway waiting for space. The next project rose from a quieter pain. In a forgotten corner of the South Side, she transformed a shuttered school into the Haven House, a shelter for nurses and healthcare workers who had lost their homes to fire, eviction, or circumstance. The space was filled with soft linens, nourishing meals, therapy sessions, and transportation to and from clinics. For the first time, these healers had a place to rest that didn't require them to beg. Charlotte watched all of it unfold from a distance, not as a benefactor but as a witness. She attended only one press conference, standing silently at the back as Danielle, in a navy blazer 2 sizes too big, choked back tears while cutting a ribbon with a trembling hand. 6 months later, Danielle stood under the arched glass dome of the Global Healthcare Summit in Geneva. Lights bathed the grand ballroom in warm gold. Hundreds of the world's top physicians, policymakers, philanthropists, and over 150 nurses flown in from crisis zones gathered, not to honor innovation or discovery, but to hear from a young nurse who had once stepped into a bullet without knowing whom she was saving. Danielle stood center stage, the keynote banner glowing behind her, restoring humanity in healthcare. She took a breath, deep and grounding, and faced the crowd. I never thought I'd be here, she began, her voice low but steady. I didn't grow up with microphones or applause. I grew up with rationed groceries and overdue notices taped to our door. I spent most of my life invisible, just one nurse in a sea of overworked, underpaid souls. I used to dream of silence, not spotlights. Laughter trickled gently through the audience. Danielle smiled, just faintly. But sometimes, she continued, life doesn't wait for permission. It throws you into the light not to reward you but to test you. I didn't run toward danger that morning because I wanted recognition. I didn't know who Charlotte Ellingson was. I saw someone in danger and I moved. A hush settled over the room, thick and reverent. The image behind her changed. A photo of Danielle weeks earlier, standing in front of the Haven House, cutting the ribbon, surrounded by staff and residents. The audience watched silently as more images played. A young nurse opening her debt clearance letter, sobbing into her hands. A new pediatric recovery unit being unveiled with Danielle's name carved softly into the wall. A mobile clinic parked in a rural town with counselors, nutritionists, and sleep pods for burnt-out staff. I could have used that money to disappear, Danielle said. But I thought about the people I knew who would never get this miracle. So I stayed. I gave back because someone once told me, the world doesn't change from the top down. It changes from the front line. She stepped away from the podium, walking slowly as the final image played. A soft white feather over a nurse's cap, the logo of her foundation, a promise to protect those who protect us. The ballroom erupted in applause, rising like a wave. People stood, some wiped away tears. But Charlotte, seated in the 3rd row in a simple black dress, didn't move. She only watched, eyes full of memory and pride, watching not the woman she had given a gift to, but the woman who had transformed that gift into a movement. Danielle bowed her head slightly, soaking in the applause. But this wasn't her final moment, because there was still one more chapter waiting on the horizon. The applause still echoed through the halls of the shining glass hotel when Danielle quietly slipped out the side exit. She didn't wait for the press. She didn't need more interviews or another lens to capture her gratitude. She needed air, something unfiltered, something still. Her assistant and security detail trailed behind, but she waved them off gently. She wasn't running from the moment, she was holding it, letting it breathe. 30 minutes later, she stood barefoot on the private balcony of her penthouse suite overlooking the sparkling lights of Geneva. The evening air was cool, kissed with an alpine breeze. In the distance, the snow-capped peaks stood like ancient witnesses, solemn and quiet, as if even the mountains knew something remarkable had happened tonight. Behind her, the glass door opened with a soft whisper. Charlotte stepped out, holding 2 mugs of steaming chamomile tea. No diamonds, no press badges, just quiet elegance wrapped in a cardigan and calm. Thought you could use something real, she said gently, handing one mug over. Their fingers brushed, familiar now, warm with history. Danielle accepted the tea, her hands wrapped around the porcelain like it held more than warmth. Thank you, she said, her voice low, for everything. They stood side by side in silence for a long while, watching the city flicker beneath them. No cameras, no audience, just two women and the weight of a moment that had reshaped them both. After a long pause, Danielle spoke. Do you ever think about that day? The gunshot. Charlotte nodded slowly. Every morning, she whispered. Sometimes I still hear it. The sound of it. The silence after. Danielle exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Me too. Another silence passed, but it wasn't heavy. It was full, lived in. Charlotte turned to her, eyes glassy but steady. You've done more with your second chance than most people ever do with their first. Danielle offered a tired smile. I had a good teacher. Charlotte raised a brow. No, she said. You taught me. I had power. You showed me purpose. The lights below shimmered like constellations. The world, vast and chaotic, looked so small from up here. Danielle looked down at her tea, then back at the city. Do you think they'll remember me in 10 years? Charlotte didn't hesitate. They'll be working in your clinics, sleeping safely in your shelters, quoting your speech. They'll remember. Danielle laughed softly, the sound half joy, half disbelief. Her throat tightened. One act of bravery, she murmured. One bullet. One choice. It changed everything. Sometimes, Charlotte replied, her voice soft, the lives we save end up saving ours in return. She closed her eyes for a moment. Not as the nurse from Bronzeville who worked night shifts and lived on vending machine dinners. Not as the girl who had run late to work and intercepted fate. But as someone who had taken her pain, her fear, her fleeting chance at survival, and turned it into a legacy that would never stop giving. And though the night around her was quiet, the world had already begun to move towards something kinder, something stronger because of her. Far below, a boy held his mother's hand outside a shelter newly opened by the First Line Fund. Inside, a nurse who once lived in her car received a warm meal and a bed. A hospital in Detroit unpacked new trauma beds stamped with the initials DP. In Kenya, a traveling medical tent offered free exams to over 300 villagers. And on a balcony in Geneva, Danielle Porter stood, wrapped in the wind and the quiet thunder of everything she'd become. Because this wasn't the end. This was the dawn. And tomorrow she would rise again. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.